sites. I made my weekend in 45th Men's English-speaking Cursillo in Namsang Mountain in Seoul, South Korea in November 2011, and I sat at the table of St. Michael. This first part is the introduction to the school leaders, and I just want to take this opportunity to go through just some of the basics. I know we've all signed up for the School of Leaders and everything, but there's a possibility when you figure out what this is all about that you just might not be interested. So the purpose of this right here is to give you an overview so that you understand what it means to be in the School of Leaders. It's a big step from being a cursista and attending Altreas and grouping to the School of Leaders. The level of commitment is a lot higher. So what we're going to talk about is what is the School of Leaders, who is called to the School of Leaders, our personal development, our commitment to the School of Leaders, how the School of Leaders works, and then we're going to talk about the Secretariat structure, the School of Leaders structure, and then the vision that we have for that. So what is the School of Leaders? It's a community in action that gives life to the whole Cursillo movement. And Father Cody mentioned earlier how the School of Leaders is kind of the lifeblood of the Cursillo movement, and that's what we will become. I think the focus of it, and the focus that we must have, is that of service. Service to the other cursistas, service to the future cursistas. Everything we do is through a gift of service. And so our goal is to become a community of service. So who is called? Being a Cursillo leader is a vocation, a calling from God. And this was an interesting concept for me to wrap my head around, and it's taken quite a while. But the Leader's Manual actually says that in order to be in the School of Leaders, we have to make the School of Leaders our primary apostolate. Primary apostolate, okay? So we're all very active in different things in our parishes. We might be leaders in different elements in our parish, and what being in the School of Leaders calls us to is to make this your primary apostolate. In other words, we might have to, in order to be in the School of Leaders, it might require us relieving ourselves of maybe some of the other responsibilities that we have in the church. Something to ponder and to think about. It's a big commitment, and certainly something I thought about for quite some time. Question we might ask ourselves: am I willing to commit the time? Am I willing to commit the effort? Am I willing to sacrifice my life for Him and His mission through the Cursillo movement? As you all know, there are a lot of different ways that we can give our time to church and to Christ's mission, and Cursillo is one of them. Next slide, please. Our personal development in Cursillo. Obviously, we've got piety, study, and action, but I think in the School of Leaders we take that to the next level. You know, the effort that we put into those gains a bit of focus and a bit of momentum in our own personal development. Our small grouping or our group reunion, it's a must that we have that going on in our lives, and that we make it a regular occurrence. Group reunions, talk about the Altrea reunions. We're actually going to do a reunion here right after this introduction, and then we've got our small group reunions, and then of course our Altreas. Next slide. The Leader's Manual states that the School of Leaders should meet weekly for 2 hours. Weekly for 2 hours. When I read that, I almost fell off my chair. We're starting off slow in the Fargo Diocese. Over the next year, I published a schedule which will be available later on today, where we're actually going to meet 6 times in 2013. Okay, starting slow. Like today, we've combined it with an Altrea so that people are traveling for the Altrea. We just come here a little bit earlier, get together, do the School of Leaders, and then have the Altrea afterwards, the Mass in between. I would tell you though that the intent is to move forward probably in 2014 with 12 meetings. You know, make it a monthly occurrence. You know, as we build momentum, this is going to become a greater apostolate. It's going to be a greater emphasis in our lives. Talked a little bit earlier about the regional school leaders. Again, the intent is not everybody has to drive to Fargo for this, but that we develop small regional cells of school leaders that can set up their own schedules and have their meetings like that. And then maybe once we get rolling with that, an annual, everybody gets together for one big school leader somewhere in the center of the diocese would be a good idea. We're going to use technology, as I discussed before, to get the talks out to people, make them available to them on our website. Next slide. Our commitment to the school leaders is to attend the group reunions, attend Altreas, and this is a little difficult to discuss, but humility and obedience. You know, am I willing to sacrifice what I believe the Cursillo movement is in order to follow what the national leadership states in the format? Okay, so in other words, it's kind of like the church. You know, we belong to the Catholic Church, and the church makes a change. And after Vatican II, they went from Latin masses to English masses. And we followed that change. Some chose not to. But the Cursillo movement is kind of formed after the church in that same way. And so we have some national leadership in the Cursillo movement that gives direction on how we should be doing our Cursillo program here in the Fargo Diocese. And it's just important for us always to remember that the Cursillo movement is led by the Holy Spirit, and that when changes come down from above, we should, as I used to say in the Air Force, just smile and salute sharply and, you know, incorporate those changes. That's what we're called to do. And so that takes humility, and it takes obedience, and just something to plant in your heart. How? As we all know from our weekends and from all the weekends we've done since our initial weekend, each member undergoes a progressive conversion. And we're all going through that conversion today. We go through it every day. We put on the mind of Christ, take part in Christ's mission. And that is our mission, is to do Christ's mission. Understand the purpose, strategy, and method of the movement, and develop the knowledge and practical experience of the techniques of the movement. What we're talking about here is the Cursillo movement is a movement designed to evangelize. So how do we evangelize? And some really smart people have gotten together and said, this is the way we do it. And so our goal is to learn what those techniques are so that we can utilize them ourselves to spread the good news. Talk a little bit about the Secretariat and its structure. With the implementation of the School of Leaders, the Secretariat is going to change a little bit. It's going to become shrink down in size by a couple of positions, and this will be done through attrition over time. But our intent is that we would have a lay director and a spiritual director, an assistant spiritual director, a secretary, a treasurer, and then a leader from each of the sections. So within the School of Leaders, we have 4 sections: the pre-Cursillo, the Cursillo, the post-Cursillo, and the School of Leadership. So in other words, the School of Leaders leadership. We'll leave it at that. Those are the 4 sections. The next slide just kind of shows that. So let's talk a little bit about what each one of these sections is responsible for. The pre-Cursillo, and I've got names up there next to the Secretariat members that are charged with these particular areas. Again, the way the Secretariat is set up is one person from, and in this case we've got sometimes 2 folks, are in charge of each one of these sections, and they report to the Cursillo. And then each one of the regions is also going to be broken down into these same 4 sections. And they're going to be communicating with the leadership from the Secretariat in some way, shape, or form which hasn't been clearly defined yet. So, pre-Cursillo, train sponsors. I think that's a huge undertaking. It's going to make a really big difference for us if we can develop ways of training sponsors. In other words, what are the responsibilities of the sponsor before the weekend and after the weekend? Actively seek candidates. Of course, we all do that, but that's a special calling for those on the pre-Cursillo. Prepare candidates for Cursillo weekends. I think this is something new. I've never heard of prepare candidates before the weekend, so this is going to be a very interesting area for the pre-Cursillo section. Distribute Polanka letters to the worldwide Cursillo and provide articles for the Good News Dispatch. The Cursillo sections, and that's headed up by Sandy Horsager. They're scheduled the weekend Cursillos, and so what we do is, because it's very difficult to get reservations for a lot of the locations that we hold Cursillos, we like to do that about 2 to 3 years in advance. We want to set up a plan 2 to 3 years in advance of where the weekends are going to be held. Select the rectors and rectoras for each weekend and provide training. All members of the conference room team must be members of the school leaders. Okay, so starting next year, you got to be in the school of leaders in order to be in the conference room. Prepare diocesan-wide applications for the weekends. This year we've got our application. It's out on the website, and it covers all the weekends for the diocese for the year. So it's just going to be one application, real easy and very easy to access. Publicize men and women's weekends via the website, the Good News Dispatch articles, New Earth, and the radio. And maintain the weekend kits. And that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, we redid Harvey's, and took us how long? 5 hours?
Yeah. Well, God bless
That
you.
was just the women's. We don't have the men's done yet.
But once they're done, then they're done.
Norm had all the rest of them done.
All right. Post-Cursillo, schedule, plan, and hold monthly ultras throughout the diocese. I say monthly because that's what the leadership manual says. Actually, in Fargo next year, we are going to have monthly Cursillos here at St. Anna Joachim.
Ultras? Ultras?
What did I say?
You said Cursillos?
Oh, okay. No, we're not going to have monthly Cursillos. We're going to have monthly ultras. We're going to have monthly ultras here at St. Anna Joachim throughout 2013, with the exception of the months of June, July, and August, because those are very lightly attended historically. What we're going to do instead is have regional picnics. So in June there'll be a picnic out in the Lemoore area. In July there'll be one here in Fargo somewhere. And then in August they're going to have one up in Devil's Lake again. So it's kind of little getaways for everybody during the summer months. The Post-Cursillo provide training on witness talks to all. Okay, there is actually training available on how to do witness talks and what they should contain.